Lucy.
Yeah,
My
there she
goodness. How
is.
is Lucy?
She's crazy.
She's
She's a
crazy.
crazy puppy.
Yeah.
She's a
Yeah.
maniac.
Well,
Yeah.
that's how puppies are.
Yeah. I love her, obviously.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
wow,
yeah.
ups and downs, ups and downs.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks for
welcome
asking.
everybody
Welcome, everybody.
to Ellen Explains It All, episode 8.
Yeah.
Crazy. If you are new to Ellen Explains It All, somehow, this is the show where I talk with our executive director, Amanda Chen, and she answers your questions, and we demystify some AWT myths, and it's a great time for everybody. Before we get started, I usually like to ask Amanda a little warm-up question. I almost forgot this month, but don't worry. I thought of one. Amanda, what is your favorite holiday?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's coming up and I've like kind of like made it its own thing. But for the past few years on Easter, and I'm not a religious person, right? But like
Hmm.
I did grow up like we would do Easter and we'd have like
Yeah.
family over. Like I don't really celebrate the holidays, but I realize like many of my friends like equally don't celebrate that holiday with their
Hmm.
families and they're around over the weekend. Um, I started a tradition a few years ago of going to dim sum in Chinatown on Easter Sunday.
Oh.
And that has become, and I just organize like a group of friends. Sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna invite like everybody I know. And sometimes I'm like, I think this year I'm just gonna invite like four people.
Yeah,
That has become like one of my favorite days of the year.
that's awesome. This past Thanksgiving, it was like the first holiday I had celebrated with friends rather than going home. And it was so nice to hang
Yeah,
out with community.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially on something like Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's lovely.
yeah.
This episode's topic, I think, is sort of rather unfortunately pretty relevant these days.
Yeah.
It is equity and inclusivity. You all came with some really great questions. I think they're, again, sort of unfortunately relevant, but good questions to ask in this sort of uncertain moment we're in right now. We have questions ranging from everything from the accessibility of theaters to diversity in casting. Lots of good stuff. And with that said, I'd love to jump in.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Alrighty, our first question. If a participant requires extra assistance throughout the season, what steps are taken to ensure that assistance is provided?
Yes, this is a very excellent question. And I will say, we have been evolving this process like for as long as I can
Mhm.
even remember. The first step is actually one that we're going to try to enforce a little bit more rigidly than we have really any time before. But we've added some language on our website to each of the program pages that states if a person needs assistance or if you're registering on behalf of someone else, like that's probably a good indication this person might need a little bit extra assistance throughout the season. We would like to schedule a video call with somebody from the AWT team, like whether that's myself or Riva, or one of our board members, as well as the director, and the individual, and perhaps like the person who's registering on their behalf or somebody who's otherwise a caregiver. And we really talk about like what the program looks like, what's expected, the amount, what the kind of support that we can offer, while
Mhm.
making it clear like we do not have people on staff who are specifically trained in either social services or special education. What we have is a very kind and supportive community that where we want everyone to thrive. And then as a result of that conversation, like as a group, like we actually make a decision on whether this is the program for that person. We have done this a few times, and I would say very successfully, either by, preparing the individual for what's to come or by deciding, this isn't the program for that person. And I think those are both successful outcomes. But what I think has changed a little bit is like really making this a requirement. So that is something that is
Mhm.
brand new, is making it an absolute requirement and having that be the required first step. I think if we do a good job on that first step, we're really like setting everyone up for success. And one of the things that we do say that, a person a person and their team should really think about whether this is the program for them is we do require a level of self-sufficiency.
Hmm.
So like if it seems like you would have to come to rehearsal and like somebody would have to accompany you the whole time in a way that is more than maybe just like sitting and waiting for you, like I don't know that I would consider that self-sufficient enough. I think somebody attending to just sort of be there just in case is fine, but like we have to like come up with, a level of self-sufficiency in order to make it required. So I think once once we can establish like those expectations and also like those boundaries, like what self-sufficiency implies is like this is what the director and the stage manager are not going to do for you, and like laying things
Hmm.
out that way. This is what we're not going to require like another participant to do for you. I think if we can more clearly set up those boundaries and like continue to improve on that process every season, I think that is like the number one way we can set everyone up for success and make sure everyone has what they need. And I hope that
Hmm.
answers the question. It really speaks more to like the pre-process than it does the actual process. But I think that
Hmm.
is, to me, I think that, goes a long way in addressing the situation, like
Yeah.
95%. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great way to go about things. Are there any kinds of shows you totally avoid due to how they depict a marginalized group? Any examples of shows folks were interested in that you turned down due to the content? Can you give a window into what that conversation was like?
Yeah, I don't know. I read this question and I was like, I don't know that I can think of an exact time when someone's suggested something that I was like, "Ugh, I don't know about that." Like
Yeah.
there's a sliding scale of like ickiness that happens. Like the further back you go in the musical theater canon, like the
Yeah.
ickier it gets. And it might be an entire storyline and it might be like a specific character in a specific moment. And I think it reaches a point where we're like, we'd have to rewrite this show in order to
Yeah.
do it. So again, like I don't know that anyone was like, we should do, I can't even think of one off the top of my head. But like we don't go digging around the golden age era of musical
Yeah.
too much. And I think anybody who knows us and wants to make a suggestion like isn't gonna go there either. Um,
Yeah.
so I will say I have no like if it did happen, I would say, oh, I don't think we would do that show. I would just be very blunt. I'd say, and here are the
Yeah.
reasons. But thank you for your interest.
Yeah. In a main stage, since roles are often cast AWT style, are the male identifying slash presenting members of the community eligible to interpret and play characters that are both originally written with other identities in mind and designated as lead or principal roles? What can they do to be genuinely and seriously considered for these parts on launch day?
This is a great question, and I think there's a little bit of like subtext is the word maybe I'm looking for
Hmm.
in the question, which is that, your the situation in traditional theater, especially in like community groups and schools, like a male presenting white guy walks in the room and opens his mouth and everyone's like, "Whoa, oh my God,
Yeah.
that's we're just trying to prevent that from happening." And
Yeah.
and we do spend time in the casting room like acknowledging that that happens. So it's just a matter of like not providing the traditional unfair advantage
Hmm.
that typically happens and making sure everyone is seen equally.
Hmm.
So first of all, a white male presenting person like can absolutely be considered for a part that is typically white male presenting and
Yeah.
often are cast that way. For other parts, like if we have deemed a part as being like, okay, this has to be portrayed by somebody representing this culture, like there's no way around that, right?
Hmm.
But for the most part, I would say most parts, like we try to consider anyone equally for anything. And for, the person asking this question and the people they are asking this question on behalf of, as well as every single other person, write on your pre-launch day form what you're interested in. Like that,
Hmm.
the teams read that They read it and they
Hmm.
really consider it. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. There's going to be all kinds of reasons whether you will or will not get that part. But please, like if something means something to you or you just like their songs, like say what you're interested in.
Hmm.
And that will really, really help.
Hmm.
But if you're
Yeah.
white guy and you're like, I want to play Cole House Walker, like, I'm sorry. Like, you're not
Yeah.
going to. And also, mm, yeah.
Yeah. They do read launch day forums because I got the exact ensemble track I wanted for Young Frankenstein. So, because I set
And
it on my launch day form.
that's the other
So,
thing. It's like it's not just about leads and parts. Like also
mhm.
say like I want to dance a lot or like I want to sing harmonies. Like, or be like sometimes I'm like, don't give me a single line. Like don't give me
Yeah.
any spoken lines. I don't want it. I don't want it. It'll
Yeah.
mean something to someone else, not me.
Yeah. I guess sort of my own thought with this question. I think part of what they're getting at, and if you're the question asker and I'm wrong, DM me. Basically, could like a male identifying presenting person be cast in like a traditionally female role? I'm
Yes.
assuming the answer is yes.
The answer
Okay.
is yes, and it's happened recently. It
Yeah.
happens a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happened in
Right.
Urinetown, it happened in High School Musical. I'm sure there's other examples I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head.
Mm.
Yeah.
What is the likelihood of AWT doing a show centered around BIPOC characters slash stories?
I would say likely. I would say
Hmm.
desire is high. Desire is
Yeah.
very high on the AWT corporate side, and we talk about it often. I won't say we talk about it consistently often, but we do talk about it, and I would love, now that we have like an actual person dedicated to program management, and it's not just me, like spreading myself
Hmm.
thin, being able to, devote some time into developing a program would be great.
Hmm. Great. It's a long one. I have a multi-part question about how diverse roles in productions are cast and how the intention to cast these roles are announced. Part 1. At what point in the pre-production process is it decided that a role in a show is going to be intentionally cast with someone who identifies in some way with that role? Part 2. Is this solely the decision of the creative team of that show, or is the board of directors and or executive director also involved in that decision? Part 3 of the question. Who decides how and when this decision is shared with the community? In recent seasons, some announcements like this have been made publicly on the AWT website prior to registration, while others have only been shared with registered participants in pre-launch day forums and not shared publicly on the website.
Okay, so part one, when in the process? The answer is as early as possible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
potentially even Riva's thinking about it as Riva is applying for the rights. So it's, flagged as early as possible. But what I will say, and it's maybe tied to, no, actually, it's a little bit tied to the part three. Sometimes we know the show months in advance, and sometimes we know it 4 weeks in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So, or even less. So as early as possible is could be 4 weeks before launch day or could be 4 months before launch day.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've, depending on when we get the rights to something and when we get the creative team in place, just not all the pieces are there in order to really like have a meaningful conversation about it. That sort of also answers the second question, which is it's the director, the creative team, primarily the director, our program manager, and our DEI coordinator, who is a board member. So it would be like this board member would be a part of the conversation, but it's not necessarily a board of directors um, under their purview, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, what the difference
Yeah.
is. Yeah. And then the third question is like when we make it public, like sometimes it is just on the website, like, hey, these parts are going to be played, by so and so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in our marketing. And sometimes it hasn't been introduced until like pre-launch day forums. I would say ideally we would have it on the website, but again, like sometimes like we have to just go, go, go because we didn't get the rights as early as we would have liked to. But I will also say something that plays a part in I'm gonna try to make this as succinct as possible. Like sometimes worry is the wrong word. I never worry, but sometimes we're like, we better make sure we have enough people of this particular identity so that we have a group of people to choose from. And then sometimes we're not worried that that's like going to be a scarcity
Mm-hmm.
situation. If we do think like, okay, we have to make sure we have enough people, like we try to like make that visible as early as possible. And we will even give a little bit more weight towards certain identities in the registration lottery. And again, during the wait list process, if we're bringing people in off the wait list. But if we don't think it's going to be like a scarce situation, like we might not ask until the pre-launch day form so that the team can use that for casting,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Ooh, very relevant, as I was saying earlier. I'm just wondering how much, if any, federal/state funding AWT gets. And if we do get any, is there a plan for what to do if they attempt to pull funding due to our commitment to DEI? Also, do you have any concerns about what shows we'll be able to perform? And if so, any plan of what to do?
Yeah. So one, we do not currently get any federal or state funding.
Mm,
So there's no danger of any existing money that we get getting pulled. What is going to be challenging is one thing I'm, trying to do is seek new sources of funding. And I think, it's becoming a little bit more limited as a result of some changes in the administration. And, I'm a part of a lot of like theater groups and arts groups. And I mean, I just every day there's just another story about, funding
right.
being pulled. In terms of content, in terms of our values and our mission, like I'm not currently concerned. So therefore I don't have a plan.
Yeah.
Look, I'm nothing if not honest. So that's where my head's at right now.
And then we have another question from the same person. They also asked, what questions do you generally ask theater/rehearsal spaces before booking in terms of inclusivity and accessibility?
So we ask about ADA compliance. Rehearsal spaces are a little easier. We basically just ask like if they're ADA compliant. Theaters, we have to get into a little bit more detail because typically when people ask them that, they're thinking about the audience members. So they're like,
Hmm.
yeah, we have a ramp and wheelchair seating. We're like, great. What about performers? So we ask if the stage is accessible for somebody who might be in a wheeled device or who has other mobility issues. We ask if the dressing rooms are equally accessible in that way. We ask if the path from the dressing room to the stage is accessible for somebody
Hmm.
who might have those needs. So we ask about like physical accessibility and inclusivity. I would not say I've ever really gotten into a conversation about like values of like
Yeah.
a location. Which is not to say if I like knew something specific about a space that troubled me, like I probably would not do business with them.
Yeah. We are already at our last question, aside from our bonus question. So stay tuned if you want to hear the bonus question. For next season, just a teaser for 2 minutes from now. For next season, Anya has a new creative team role,
Liaison.
liaison. I'm not editing that out. Can you explain more? Can you explain more about what that looks like in practice and how one could apply for that role in the future if this season goes well and it's a role you use in future shows?
Yeah. Great question. Before I answer it, one thing I will say is like I'm not really a big believer in like cookie cutter things. So
Mhm.
like yes, we have a director and a music director and a stage manager for every show. Sometimes their roles are like based on who we get, like they are going to be different from each other. Their styles are going to be different, in terms of what they're involved in, or like if we get a choreographer and what the director and the choreographer do, like sometimes that is, flexible and moves around. The role of community liaison was actually something that Anya came up with. She's a community liaison and a featured choreographer. So the role was basically kind of custom made for this season. Our director, our wonderful director, Dante, is somebody that Anya introduced to us.
Nice.
And as a new creative team member, what we have found with brand new creative team members, if they've never worked with AfterWork Theater before, we are very different. We are very different from other theater groups. We are certainly very different from professional theater.
Hmm.
And so it can be quite an adjustment period for new folks to like get acclimated to like what is AfterWork Theater all about, like what works for our participants, what are some of the personalities you have to deal with in the room, and like how do you navigate it? And quite frankly, like, since we're on the topic, in particular, when we have creative team members who are people of color, like it can be really hard. It is a
Hmm.
very, very hard job to like lead this community who is, the casts are not totally comprised of, people who reflect the lived experiences of a diverse group of people. We're
Right.
trying very hard to like, become a more diverse and inclusive space, but we have to be an inclusive space in order to do that. Like we can't say like, hey, we got to get more people, different kinds of people in here so that we can be diverse. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not it. You have to be the values first and become a space that is desirable and appealing to everyone. So therefore, this is on our website. Like if you go to our hiring page, like we have a pledge that we have everybody who comes to work for us agree to if they're going to work for us, either on staff or on a creative team. And it mentions like how it can be hard for creative team members who are people of color to lead this particular community. And it's really important for our creative team members who are white and more, you know, like kind of are more of a reflection of our participants, to be supportive of their teammates, and acknowledge that the experience is different and it's hard. So we created this role. One, Anya loves AfterWork Theater and loves this
Yeah.
community and certainly loves Dante, and like, is there to sort of help bridge, like, it's not really a gap. Maybe it's a gap of understanding, or a gap of
Hmm.
empathy, or a gap of shared lived experiences. But she's there to like kind of like ease in. Like our whole creative, like I don't mean to just focus on Dante. Like our music director is brand new, our choreographer is
Hmm.
brand new. Like it's a brand new creative team. And fortunately, we have both Anya and Savannah on the team
Hmm.
to also like bring in like, this is what Afterwork Theater is about. This is what we can prepare you for. This is what we can help, field in the room. And that's what the role is. So I would not say there's going to be a cookie cutter job description for what this is. What I will say is like, if there's a need and someone wants to fill it and create a job out of it, we'd be happy to like consider that.
I'm so excited by this all new creative team.
Oh yeah, me too. I heard launch weekend was so fun.
My goodness, I bet.
I heard great things, but
Yeah.
also sometimes you don't hear the other things.
Great. Well, that was our last official question.
Oh my God.
But yes, but I wanted to include a bonus question. This is actually something someone submitted as a future topic, but I think it's something that would probably be better to address sooner rather than later. So I figured we could talk about it right now instead of doing Mythbusters. Amanda's off the hook this time around. So, our super special bonus question. Could we talk about the Riva to Mackie transition and how that impacts the summer and fall seasons?
Great question. So, operationally, in the month of July, both Mackie and Riva will be co-program managers and sharing the role. And throughout that month, Riva will be training Mackie and like kind of like doing the job with Mackie, probably starting out as shadowing, and by the end of the month,
Hmm.
like doing. And then at the beginning of August, we all sob and say goodbye to
Yeah.
Riva, who I'm gonna miss so much.
Yeah.
Um, but also on to wonderful, wonderful opportunities. The summer season is already kind of getting planned right now. And by the
Nice.
goal is by the end of July that like most of the fall season will be determined.
Nice.
So like things are moving forward. And
Hmm.
I think we're trying to, so that like when Mackie kind of starts on her own in August, she's tying up the loose ends of the fall season, but also like really getting a head start on the winter and spring seasons.
That's awesome that
Yeah.
everything's moving along so smoothly.
Yeah.
Love when that happens. So rare these days.
Absolutely. I know. I know. Look, it sounds so smooth right now, but like, I'm trying to get ahead. I'm a very last minute person. I'm a
Mhm.
big procrastinator. It's really important I surround myself with people who will push me and who also are proactive in their own ways. So
Yeah.
hopefully this goes really
Goodness.
smoothly. It will. It will.
Yeah, it will. Speaking it into existence.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have for this
Oh,
episode. I know. So quick this time around. Efficient.
yes, absolutely.
Thank you as always, Amanda, for being so open. And thank everyone else, as always,
Yeah,
for submitting awesome questions. You're the best, and this obviously wouldn't be possible without you. So thanks.
I agree. Thank you to the
Yeah.
community and thank you, Ellen, for being such an amazing liaison
Liaison.
to the community and really advocating for their questions. So
Oh,
thank you.
yeah, of course.
Great.
All
Till next time.
right. Bye.